Yay. And, all right, in today's presentation, the three women, actually the four women who are up there, but our three panelists are the descendants, the daughters of people who were very instrumental in making San Miguel the wonderful place it is today. And in honor of them, we wanted them to talk about, well, I won't tell you what they're talking about because honestly I don't know. But we hope you enjoy it, and when it's, we're finished talking, if you have any questions or suggestions or whatever, we'd gladly like to hear from you. Thank you.
Okay, so yes, I'm Polly Stark Ortega. And we have here at the table, to my right is Dina Spencer. And then we have Georgianne Johnson. And finally, we have Gina Giampoli Marquez. So, very important. And so I think what I'll do is, I'm going to just open this evening with a really silly question or a memory. And one of the first things that comes to mind, we all grew up here. I came here we moved here when I was just 13. Dina was how old?
I was 27.
Okay, 27. Georgie?
What year was that?
1957?
1957?
Was when you came?
Yeah, but it was before. I was 14.
14. And Gina?
I was 7 months old.
So there we are. Four girls raised in San Miguel. You couldn't get apples.
No, you couldn't.
There was no such thing as a decent apple. And every time I go to the supermarket and I see the apples, I always remember that apples were one of those things that...
They were horrible.
They were horrible if you did get them. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that one out there. There was no such thing as a manzana. Okay? And why don't I go first to the ladies with the question or the comment. I too have been digitalizing lots and lots of photos of San Miguel from the 1960s. And one of the things that strikes me is over and over again, and both I and Georgie have brought books to prove this, is how small the village of San Miguel really was back in the 60s. We are talking about one-story high homes, small homes. I think the only place where there were two-story buildings was maybe in the first block around the Jardín. Mm-hmm. That was it. Mm-hmm. So let's drag up some memories first of that, what I think we feel is a much quainter time in what is now a bustling, booming international city. Okay? What couldn't we get here back then?
You couldn't get a turkey.
You couldn't get turkeys unless it was a live one being sold in the market. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Yeah.
I recall we couldn't get Tampax.
That's correct. Yeah.
Couldn't. Our parents would take care of that, whether they were going to Mexico City or on a trip to the US, and then also they would come down with decent underwear. Cotton underwear.
Sheets were very hard
Sheets?
to find. Mm-hmm.
What about you two?
Cat food? I remember my parents having to buy retazos at the carniceria, at the market, and it was just whatever is left over from beef pieces and scraps for cats. what I remember.
Well, when we were first here in 57, 58, 59, God, Mexican chocolate with that cinnamon taste.
Oh, yeah.
Forget it. And that Sanchez grocery store, it had raisins with kind of real chocolate to me, so that's the only I bought. So God, to get to Mexico City and Sanborns.
Yes.
Oh.
Sanborns was like,
Sanborns and get real chocolate, in my opinion. Not to mention, it was the beginning of Mad Magazine. You could get Mad
Oh, yeah.
Magazine.
oh yeah. I think Cece may have an issue still for sale. She's out in the audience.
So that was my thing, was chocolate.
Chocolate.
Mm-hmm.
And if you lived here and people came to visit, they were the burros bringing down whatever you needed. You could not visit without bringing Limburger cheese, or I even brought a frozen turkey with me on the
Yes,
airplane down
I think
for Thanksgiving.
one came to our house
Yes,
that way, as did a
yes.
giant salami.
I also remember when they were still delivering milk by cart. In the cans. Yeah, raw milk.
That we would boil.
Right, exactly. You had to make it rise 3 times before you actually could drink it.
And then you would take the nata off the top, slice open a bolillo, put that in with some sugar. That was good compared to the chocolate.
Yeah.
Well, I remember they still had the guy with the milk cans when I moved back in
Oh, yeah.
30 years ago. They still had that going on for a while.
And of course, beef. Beef. There was lots of chicken. And one of the things that I believe all our mothers probably would commiserate over was, how many ways can you make chicken? Chicken was present on a menu at least what?
Oh, that's what you had.
That's
Chicken soup for lunch, chicken for dinner. Yeah, a lot of chicken. A chicken foot soup. Remember that with
chicken
chayotes.
foot soup,
Yeah.
right? Lots of chicken.
When my mother had the hotel in the 70s, and there was, still not good food, she used to go to Mexico City every 6 weeks with coolers and go to the big San Juan market and buy fish
Yeah.
and good meat and exotic vegetables like artichokes and Brussels sprouts. And so if you can imagine going to Mexico City every 6 weeks to be able to get good food, that's what she did.
The only beef that I can think of back when I was growing up, because we think about steaks, right, as expats or from another country. But if you're in Mexico, and back in those days, it was more the bistec,
Yeah, like flank steaks.
flank steaks, and they were all pounded thin like a piece of paper, and that was our beef.
Still really tough.
Yeah. It was always tough, yeah.
And so just to seg now from that quick conversation about beef, I'd like Georgie to tell everybody who exactly her mother was.
Oh, my mother was Betty Kempe, and she was an adventuring woman, and that's why we first arrived the summer of '57. And I'll tell my far back story about that. But how did my mother know about San Miguel in 1957? Because it wasn't on the map. It's because her brother, my uncle, had a high school friend that when the Instituto first promoted to the GIs, so his name was Jim Phillips, and he came down here and wrote my uncle a letter and said, "This is a very cool little place. You and Margaret should come down." And he had been a pilot in World War II, so he bought a little 2-seater plane after the war. And he and Margaret instrument hopped to Laredo. And from Laredo, had been told, go 600 miles south, and they flew over the railroad tracks until they saw the parroquia. And then they landed in a farmer's field. And this is 1948. There are no cars around or taxis. So they arrived the last 5 miles in an ox cart. So that's just the story of someone I knew that arrived in an ox cart. So there you go.
And then, how did your father, Jim Giampoli, get to San Miguel?
Well, at the time, this was back in 1968, he was studying fresco in La Academia de San Carlos in Mexico City. And at that time, he was friends with my uncle David Taylor, who's also an artist. You know my uncle David. They were friends. My uncle invited my dad to come to San Miguel, and my uncle, being married to my mom's sister, Genia, invited him to a party that my mom was hosting at her parents' house. If you all know Tivoli restaurant on Hernandez Macias, that's the house, my grandparents' house, before it was sold. It was sold after my grandmother died. So that was where my dad met my mom at a party at their house.
I love that. And then they met. Obviously, they married.
They met, and after my dad had to go back and finish his master's in art. And
To Baltimore.
in Maryland, at the University of Maryland. And then he kept correspondence with my mother for a whole year, and then decided to come back after a year, and he proposed, and they got married at the La Capilla de El Oratorio.
Nice wedding. Well, I had the good fortune to be a student of Gina's dad, Jim Giampoli, who, correct me if I'm mistaken, at the Instituto Allende, after he did return, he was the instructor of drawing.
Life drawing, lithography, painting.
Yeah. And so I worked with him in the printmaking studio. I had started teaching at Bellas Artes, fresh out of college, freshly married at the age of 21, and with children hanging from my hips. I took on my first job at Bellas Artes in the printmaking department, and it was pretty terrific over there. The culture of Bellas Artes, the students that came, there were throngs of people taking classes at Bellas Artes. Mm-hmm. And one afternoon, Jim Giampoli, who I admired tremendously as an artist, he was seated on a bench, staring down the door to the printmaking room. And I came out, and he said, in his inimitable style, "You want a job?" And he offered me the sun and the moon and the stars to go and help him reopen the printmaking department at the Bellas Artes. At the Instituto, sí. It was when RISD students were still coming down in the winter quarter to study. And I worked there briefly and loved my time with Jim. His wit, his dry sense of humor, his vast knowledge of the visual arts, he was phenomenal. And I still mostly remember his beautiful portraits of your mother.
Mm-hmm. My mother was his main muse. Yes. So you kind of see her face in some of the, especially the life drawings, yes.
Yeah, and the lithos.
And the lithographs, yes, exactly.
Yeah. So, yeah, here's to Jim. And then we move along now to, let's see, who haven't I given equal time to? You want to talk about your mom?
My mom came here
stepdad?
In 1945. She was at the U.S. Embassy in Mexico City with her husband at the time, and my two oldest sisters were born in Mexico City, although she claims they were conceived under the yucca tree at Atascadero Hotel.
The giant yucca tree.
The giant yucca tree now. So there was only 7,000 people in the whole town in those days. So when she married Dean on their honeymoon, they came here and that was 1977. They came here and she was anxious to show him San Miguel. And of course, St. Paul's was looking for a new priest, and he had been the priest at St. Mark's Episcopal Church in Palo Alto, where he and my mother met. So they just said, well, it's a sign, and they moved down.
Oh,
And
okay, so that's how that happened. Okay, and then back to Georgie. Okay, so you guys come on down to Mexico now. Tell us how.
Okay, so since we knew about San Miguel and had heard about it, we came the summer of '57. And in that month or two at the Instituto Hotel, when Jaime and Rudy were little boys and ran around everywhere, my mother met Augusta Irving and found out that there was a one-room schoolhouse here in English, and I was about to enter high school. So we went home, got our clothes, and came back for 2 years. So.
And enrolled with Augusta.
Oh, of course.
Okay, let's all do the Augusta finger. Ready?
That's right. It's like this.
Gina, did you go study with Augusta?
I did not. My cousin Patricia Merrill, she did.
Okay, she did.
But I went to elementary school at the Catholic school on Mesones. It was Pedro de Gante, Fray Pedro de Gante. Couldn't remember the name, Fray Pedro, which is now somewhere else, but it used to be on Mesones Street. And then I did my high school and middle school on over at Fuego Nuevo and Lipila before going to college in Querétaro.
To the Tec de Monterrey? Or,
Tec de Monterrey.
Mira, sí.
Got my bachelor's in corporate communication.
Ah, good. Well, for those of you who, I'm not going to ask where you went to school.
Not here.
Not here. So this was indeed a little school that operated, gosh, I don't know when Augusta first opened her little school.
She started about 55 or 56.
Little 2-room schoolhouse. I also attended. One room at first, but then there was the open part down below for the older students. Cece and I were there for 1 year. But that was a kick in the pants, that school. Why? We were, every day you were given a book with the assignments that you had to complete that day. And there was a stack of textbooks at your little tiny desk. So what we would do is we would open up our notebooks. There was Augusta's red pen telling us what to do on math, page 89, exercises 6 through 70. Okay, look for the math book in the pile, pull it out, open it up, and off we went. I don't know if it was the same for you.
Well, what I remember the most, and actually in retrospect think it was the best thing I did, we had to write a composition every week.
Yes.
So we had to sit
lots
there
of
and
writing.
think about, yes, lots of writing. But what I think about later, looking at college, probably doing those compositions was the thing that worked the best for me in college. Getting into college as well as during college was having to do those compositions
With Augusta. And we were each called up to our desk while she would go through the books and the homework. And so hence my comment about her marking up our papers. She was the first little bilingual educational system in San Miguel. Let's put it that way. She was light years ahead of her time.
I think Mexico as a whole, I was not in San Miguel, but I was in Jalisco, in Jocotepec, in the early 60s going to school. And Mom was there with her husband, my dad, and we went to the Catholic school. And I have to tell you, in 3rd grade, we were doing dividing fractions, and you had to sharpen your pencil. Well, you got a razor blade to do that, and they would snap the razor blade in half, so you sharpened your pencil that way.
Good training.
Yeah, and you did have to write, and I only got out of school a little bit early because I would use our English books, and I would teach my classmates English, and that got me out of school 30 minutes earlier.
That's nice. That's really nice.
Yeah, so.
Do you have any grand memories of being in grammar school with the madres?
I see.
They were strict.
They were very strict, and they were not very, I don't know, I guess they were just doing their job. They did a good job. But yeah, my grammar is great because of them. They were very strict about, grammar. And what do I remember? I remember that they would make our food for the recess time, and it was usually bolillos cut in half they're called molletes. So they cut the bolillo in half, and they put the refried beans and cheese. And that was part of our lunch. And then there was a little store under the stairs inside the building where we had the little concession store, and you'd buy your candies there. And then we could run outside and buy candy from the guy who had a little cart with a little cover, and he would be in the corner of Mesones and Hidalgo. That's where he had this cart. I remember just running out and getting tamarindo candy. Oh, yeah, it was fun, and then hurtful for my stomach. Very spicy.
Should we talk old-fashioned Mexican candy for a
Oh my
second?
goodness.
The white with the fluorescent pink coconut candy was my favorite. Yeah.
How about the little clay pots with tamarind paste?
Oh, those
and
were
chile,
good.
and we would take the little tiny clay pots and work them with our tongues and work it and work it and work it.
Until it hurt too much. Yep.
End up with a
Rash.
tongue that was all scraped up. What was your favorite candy?
At the border and at Sanborn's.
Go to Sanborns. You don't get to go to
That's not fair.
Well, I'm just telling you the truth.
Oh,
That was
okay.
my
No.
favorite candies. was
What I'm
there.
saying in San Miguel?
No, I mean,
The cajeta paletas, those were good. And sometimes, if you were lucky, you could get that peanut butter cakey thing
Oh, the mazapan.
with the roses on it
Right.
that wasn't already too stale to eat.
See.
Yeah,
See.
that was good, if you could get a fresh one.
Well, it was all delicious. And even now, I know my grown children, probably your son, I don't know, when they do come and visit or travel north, they take Mexican candy because it's so unique. So, all right, so moving right along, let's pick up these books because we wanted to share these two books with everybody. Where am I going with this now? Mexican Hilltown is a book that I grew up with. It was published in 1963, I think it is, and it's full of the greatest photographs of San Miguel as it was in the early 60s. But even older than this book, Georgie has a book that she'd like to introduce to everybody because it's
yes,
an icon.
the reason I brought it is because I'm about to order more copies from Michael Oweiler, who's the son of Peter Oweiler, who was the photographer in the 50s and 60s in San Miguel Allende. And I mean, the only one that had real cameras instead of little brownie snapshot things like the rest of us. So these photos, if anybody would like to come see it after the talk, and if you like it, I'm about to place an order with Michael, and I can put yours in the order, but just to say, they're unique, good photos from the 50s in San Miguel Allende, so that's why I brought it today.
Are they going to be on sale somewhere else? Are you going to have them at the bookstore here?
No, I just
You-
order from Michael. He lives in California, that's
Oh,
all.
I thought maybe they were available here.
No.
Okay.
No.
I don't
But
think
she
so.
has a sign-up sheet in the front, and you can put your email address and your name, and she'll order them for
And then
you.
I'll order them for you, and my order, and then call you when they get here, or email you.
So that's our commercial announcement. Here comes another one. Remember the blackbirds in the Jardín?
Oh, yeah.
So how many people out there remember the blackbirds in the Jardín?
The
Yeah.
cacophony of noise.
Where there were so many you couldn't hear, and they would be flocking about, and now they've moved along. See?
Well, that's one of the memories that I wish I had still, because it was at sundown that they would come and roost, and you just heard all of them sing and go back home, and it was a beautiful sound along with the church bells. But yeah, they're not there anymore.
Absolutely, with the church bells. And then Georgie and I were talking the other day when we met at Diane's house to sort of try to get a semblance of what were we going to talk about. And we began discussing where the Santa Monica Hotel was located. And interestingly, our grandmother actually lived pretty much next door in what was the Mojica compound. And we shared this wonderful memory. We had no idea, we both knew about the white burro at the top of the hill near Pepe Lobo's veterinary kennels. And so,
Yeah, I was just, remember the white burro because she was white and named Paloma. And it was just, we liked to go see Paloma. It was next door.
very simple pleasures back then. Things we liked to do, or things we couldn't do. Where should we start?
Before
Wow.
before you go into that, can I share a memory? Because I can't share Paloma because that was before my time. But there is a memory of, do you remember Hotel San Francisco on San Francisco Street in the corner of Hidalgo? And there used to be a room in there that they created, the owners of the hotel, where they had La Loca. Remember La Loca? Loca meaning the mad woman, crazy woman. And so there was a room where you could take your friends. So I used to take my friends who weren't from San Miguel to see La Loca. And they were appalled every time I took somebody. You're going to take me see this crazy woman in a room? She's locked up in a room? What? And I'm going to go see her? Of course I want to go see her, but this is crazy, right? This was really something weird. And so you would take the friend to the Hotel San Francisco, show them into this room. They had to go in, close the door behind them, step into a stoop, and look through this like window.
It's way high
It was
up.
high up. You couldn't see. You're like, oh my God, this woman is behind this room, and there's a window to go see her. People are crazy.
But she was dangerous.
She was dangerous. She was going to attack you if you went in there. So what happened? People went in there and they climbed up and they looked up into the window, and to look into and there was a mirror, so you see your face right away. So you thought that the person, but it obviously wasn't real, but it was to scare them. So that was one of my memories.
So that was one of the things we did like to do, take our friends to see La Loca in the Hotel San Francisco.
Did San Miguel have the custom of walking around the Jardín, the women one direction, the men the other, and then along the sides and the corners there were the ladies that sold the flowers. In Jalisco they had eggs that had been hollowed out with confetti, and they would crack those on your head. Those were for the younger children would do that, and then you always had to walk with the nanny or the chaperone. You couldn't just like do it by yourself.
This book has the photos of the chaperones in the Jardín with the young ladies and the young women.
So the women would walk on the inside edge around the Jardín, and the men would walk the opposite direction. And then you could wait until they came around again and maybe little smile there, and maybe you'd get a flower. And of course, I wasn't here, I was in Jalisco, but we would get out of the movie theater seeing Cantinflas, and then we'd have to go to the Jardín to get our flowers. And I, was like 9 years old, but still. And to this day, gardenias are my favorite
Are
flower
they?
because of that,
Oh, the Jardín.
that tradition.
Well, we did have that tradition. I think it must have, when my mom and her sisters were girls, they did that, and I'm sure you did as well, Polly and Georgina. But even when I was in middle school and maybe high school even, we still had that tradition that we went downtown. The girls went in one direction, the guys went in the other direction, and you just, saw the guy or the girl that you liked when you passed them by, and you just said hi and kept on going and talking. So, yeah, it was
a
fun.
good memory.
And by 10 p.m.,
Oh, yeah,
that was it.
yeah.
The
And that was
streets were
Sundays.
emptied.
That
Well,
was on
but on
Sundays.
any given day, yeah,
The walking around the
there's a
Jardín.
name for it.
Yeah.
El Paseo. Thanks, Cis. El Paseo. But on any given night, 10 o'clock, man, everybody was in their homes. It didn't matter how old you were, where you were on a street. There were only, 2 street lights per block, if that. You went home.
Mm-hmm.
You went home. There weren't clubs. No. And restaurants, I think we could count the restaurants on one hand, probably, right? So everybody went instead to each other's homes. And this is I'm sure Mrs. Kempe had many a party in her home when she wasn't busy at the inn.
No, there were mostly, if the guests that time wanted to do something special, it was usually around the guests that were there. After a few years, and then back in the 60s in the States, her dream was to come back to San Miguel Allende. We had gone to Europe. Europe was okay, but it wasn't San Miguel Allende. So her dream to come back was to buy something like a posada. And when her mother died and she got an inheritance, boy, she was down here. And she spent a year living at Sonia Cervantes, the Cervantes apartments, looking for just the right property. And when the Santa Monica came up, she bought it. So that's the story on that.
My mom almost bought the Santa Monica in the 70s later because she said, I was offered to buy it for $150,000 and she didn't do it. And she said, I don't know why I didn't do it. I don't know. It was it was after 77. So
I don't know, because she sold it in '85.
yeah, Mom didn't buy it. She said she didn't do it. She said I should have, but I didn't.
Well, I was going to say, do you think that any of my mother's 3 girls had the good sense to come down and help her run it so we could sell it later?
Right.
Yeah.
I have a connection to Santa Monica. My husband and I had our wedding reception there.
What year?
1997.
Oh, that's
Was
just
after-
recent.
That was just
Yeah, that
only
was
27 years
Yeah,
ago.
yeah, anyway.
So, Via Santa Monica, I have great memories of course, that facade, the unique facade. I found a photo somewhere, not here. Anyhow, you all recall it. It has this wonderful stenciled facade. This was a building that actually had a decorated surface, and it wasn't beige or ochre or white or red. That's something I miss personally.
I think it's still to this day, when you go into the Santa Monica, you're transported back to the
Yes.
Mexico of the 60s. Those tiled roofs, the slant, it's so, I think of all the places in town, that
Yeah.
one evokes the most feeling of old Mexico. I love it for
the
that.
chubby columns.
Oh, and since it was Padre Mojica that started that, Mother and Mary Lou sometime in like 74, 75 were taking a freighter trip around South America, and they got off in Peru and went to Lima and visited Father Mojica. And he died a couple of years later, so they were the last San Miguelenses to see Father Mojica.
Father Mojica married my parents
Oh, okay. There you go.
What? Get out of here.
in 1969.
Oh, that's great. That's really
a good
neat.
story.
Yeah.
And Father Mojica, for anybody in the audience who is not familiar with who he was started out as a film and theater
movie stuff.
actor, but he also sang. He sang incredibly well alongside Pedro Vargas. And then he renounced all that and became a monk. Opened Mexiquito first, or went to Peru first? I don't know. Or both.
Well, I don't know. He might have been in Peru and then come back, and then went permanently to Peru.
But he first opened the boys' orphanage up on the hill of Mexiquito, which even that, Mexiquito was way the heck out there.
So far away.
I mean, it was so far away.
So far away.
And it was on a hill all by itself. And there was only a little road that slowly went past the Aurora, kept on going, then snaked around Mexiquito, where the landmark was the boys' orphanage. And
that's something that's, I mean, even for everybody that's new, the growth that the bus station was way out of town. It was out of town.
I
a
remember
second,
where it was
wait,
in front of the Instituto Allende.
I remember when it was in the Jardín.
Yeah.
All
I
the
remember
buses-
when the buses came to the Jardín.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, there was a time where the buses parked right in front of La Parroquia, and that's where you got your bus, and you had your taxi cabs that parked around the Jardín.
Yep.
But then the buses moved to outside of San Miguel, all the way to the Instituto Allende, and that's where they all parked.
Yeah.
And then now all of that is downtown.
And I remember, at least when I was here, I was meeting Cece one time, and she said, "I'll meet you at the original gas station." And Dennis, my husband, said to me, "Where's that?" And I said, "Well, if I have to tell you, you have not been here long enough." But there was only one gas station.
That's right.
Even in 86, there was still only one
And
gas
it didn't
station.
always have gas.
No, it didn't have gas
Right.
always, yeah.
Just like there
So
wasn't always.
It's grown it's grown so much. Mom and Dean came in 77.
Uh-huh.
They lived on Aldama, where the church put them up first. Then they built the house on Salida to Querétaro. Then they bought the land out in Cieneguita. And that was a one-lane dirt, potholed, wretched
Rutted,
road.
muddy.
There was no bridge across the river. So if you wanted to go to like Leon, you had to come all the way back in, all the
That's
way to
right.
the dam, across the dam and up. And people thought Mom was just nuts. Aren't you scared out there? It was not, no, we weren't
Well,
scared.
Go ahead.
I just was going to
No, I'd
say
love it if
something
you guys would talk.
about Michael Oweiler that's making another book of the negatives. He sent me one picture, just email, the origin of the Colonia San Antonio. He's about near the Instituto, maybe a little further, and just looking across green fields, and there's the church with about 4 houses around it. That was it.
That was it, yeah.
That was it.
Yeah.
And then Colonia Guadalupe was equally dinky.
Yes.
Yeah, and it just a couple of homes. San Antonio there was the Campo Marte, where they played baseball, and the circus would come to town, which now is La Aldea, the Hotel La Aldea. And
Right.
so you had the baseball
Right.
games, the circus, the feria, Do you recall that?
Well,
you probably don't.
I don't. When I was growing up, I remember that the last out towards Salida Celaya, the very last, I don't know, part of the San Miguel was Colonia Guadiana.
Yeah.
And then it was La Cruz Roja was around there, and that was it. And then we moved there. My parents bought the land where the house is now back in 1977, maybe. And we moved there, and everybody thought, why are you leaving San Miguel?
Yeah, that's right.
And so the house started being built in the early 80s, and there was nobody around, nothing. So it was really, that was Cinco de Mayo. That's where the house is. And that was like a house out in the campo.
Yeah.
And then little by little, it was because of that house that they pulled electricity and water out to that area. And yeah, little by little, it started growing, but little by little. And then all of a sudden, it's like, oh, we're downtown now.
And the buses go up and down, and Fuego Nuevo was built, and El Pipila.
El Pipila. The schools were built, and then everything
were all
started
built
going
on
there.
Upper
Yes.
Cinco de Mayo.
It used to be called Calle Caracol, that street, and then it became Cinco de Mayo.
See. And it used to just be like hard-packed dirt. I recall just like the extension of Aldama, Prolongación de Aldama, the street that used to go past Villa Santa Monica was dirt-packed.
Well, and the end of the park was the end of town.
Yeah, it was.
So there we are with that. Oh, I have another memory here. Dun, dun, dun. I can recall, maybe you can, when did you get your first television?
Here.
Here.
I remember my grandmother's house on Hernandez Macias. The house had 3 TVs. One didn't work, which was the base. Then was a second one that didn't work either, but it was part of the base. And then we had the third one very on top. It was a tower of TVs, and the only one that worked was the very one at the top, and it was the smallest one too. I guess I must have been 4 years old when I remember that.
Really?
And I remember seeing The Hunchback of Notre Dame on that. That was my first visual.
Black and white, color?
Of course.
Oh, what? Black and white?
Because the movie was black and white,
Oh,
but yes.
okay.
And was the TV black and white? I'm pretty sure it was, yeah.
Did you guys have a TV at a certain point?
Not until I moved back here 30 years ago.
Okay, right. I know there weren't any
TV
TVs.
on Calle Chorro, that was it. Not before that.
What about you?
No, Mom and Dean didn't. No.
Yeah,
No
we didn't
TVs.
have a TV. We didn't have a TV.
No, we'd listen to music. And,
So did we.
the one
Records.
thing that I do remember, and you guys can probably all relate to this, is the way the houses are built here when it's the wintertime. We were in bed like at 8 o'clock because it's so cold inside the house that you're just like, I can't sit up anymore. I got to go get into bed. And in the mornings, it was warmer outside than it is
That's
inside
right.
the house.
That's
It's still
right.
like that right
and
now.
it's and it and
I feel like that in my house.
when I built my house out in Cieneguita, I built it totally different. And I remember Mom criticizing me. Why are you spending so much money on the... I said, because I'm not going to do
To
that.
freeze.
Because I'm going to live in a house with thick walls so that I'm not frozen every morning.
Electric blankets.
Yeah.
There were electric blankets if you were lucky and plugged in the electric
Because you
blanket.
brought
you
it
had
back from
electrical
somewhere else.
outlet.
If you had an outlet near the bed, because the rooms had what?
One outlet.
One socket to plug into. We didn't have a television either. And I recall on the corner of Corregidora and San Francisco was the first Electra store that sold appliances, beds. Well, they had a TV in the front entrance, right on the corner there. And if there was a soccer game going on, you could barely get around the corner, and I mean walking, because there were so many men and boys and kids gathered in front of Electra. Así. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Yep.
What about tortilla machines? Do
Oh,
you
yeah.
remember when those came? Because in the 60s, they came and they made that creaky sound, the
creaky
chain
sound.
going over in the little wire, and we would sit there and watch this conveyor belt taking tortillas around. I mean, for hours. Just sit and watch it. It was like
the best.
amazing.
And the best snack.
It was amazing.
The
But
best snack.
even before that, do you remember the women that sat outside of the mercado with their canastas and had their handmade tortillas, and you had to go up there and buy tortillas and pick the one tortillas from? They would sit next to each other, and you didn't know who to buy from. And they were the best handmade tortillas, I swear. They were small, but thin and so delicate and beautiful. Is another memory that some of us remember and cherish.
Did you want to say something to that effect?
No.
No?
Okay.
That's okay?
No, I
You want chocolate?
first memory of the first memory of tortillas when we moved here, and Carmen and Jim Hawkins lived a few houses down, and they had the baby, and we went to go see the baby, and Carmen would be making tortillas in her fireplace, and I was just fascinated because it was a whole thing to have a fireplace and this woman sitting there making tortillas. So that's my first memory of tortillas.
Your tortilla experience. Well, they would also come to the door, and then every day they would come to the door, at least at the Recreo house, knock on the door, and our mother had a preference for the very thin, white tortillas. They were so much more delicate. So that's what we got. I personally prefer the thick, heavy ones that, you know. But anyhow, that was always a challenge to figure out. Well, do we want the tortillas de maíz blanco, delgaditas, or the heavier ones?
Yep.
So,
Yep. Butter and salt.
and I'm checking off my list here. Who else came to those doors?
The milk guys, well, yeah, the milk guys, the wood with the burros, the guys with the wood
And the dirt.
and dirt. Yeah.
Tierra,
Oh, yeah. selling the
asparagus, fresas,
figs sometimes.
figs,
No
people,
apples.
people looking for handouts. No apples ever. Pears now and then, but the big Mexican pear, the one from the orchard, el perón, they would come by bringing perones. ¿Qué más?
The little peaches, but
Ah.
not freestone peaches, just the little ones that were good. But all those fruits and things that somebody would have, and they'd come along, and still out in Cieneguita, there are the trucks that go by with the recorded music, and the guys telling you they'll pick up your refrigerators, any metal that you have, and they also still sell vegetables and all of that
Out
in
of the
Cieneguita
truck.
out of the truck.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people there don't have a car, and there's no grocery stores out in Cieneguita. There's just the little corner stores still.
Okay, now I have to move on to another topic. Then we'll get back to the other stuff. This evening was billed as ways that our parents contributed. Your parents, and your parents, and your parents. And so I would like Dina to tell us about the beginnings of, I guess, Feed the Hungry,
Yep.
right?
The Feed
So
the Hungry.
Take it
So,
away.
Dean was the priest at St. Paul's, and in those days, St. Paul's wasn't just church. It was a gathering spot. Everybody went there, and Mom and Dean, along with the Adalberts and the Castleberries, wanted to put together this plan. I remember it well because we didn't have kitchens. We had to do all the stuff. And Robin and Beto and I would be lugging 50 pounds of beans and rice into where they lived in Guadalupe.
Ah, okay.
So Robin and Beto at that time lived there, and it
Robin's
just,
her sister.
My sister. And
Beto is her brother-in-law.
yes, they own El Pegaso, which that's a different story. But it really started just taking off, and started sort of charity thing, but then really thanks to the Castleberries and the Adalberts, it became this, nonprofit real organization. And to think that we used to do some of the cooking for the children, and now there's so many kitchens in the community all around. They also were very, Mom and Dean really promoted everything. They were very active with Patronato Pro Niños, and they were also, they loved when the Biblioteca started the home and garden tours. Mom and Dean had their home as one of the first homes that was on the tours. And so still to this day, if the group calls me up and says, hey, Dina, can we come to your house? I always say yes, because sort of honor to my mom that she did that. And it was a lovely fundraiser, because it would help raise school supplies for the children, because they don't, all these little schools that are around, there's 500 communities that San Miguel, the municipality of San Miguel, is responsible for. And those children with books and pencils, and you get a book, you have to cover it. That's a
right.
big thing at school.
You have to put a cover on your book.
Cover your books, and you have to have your own pencils and your paper and all of that. And those can get really expensive for some of the families out, just for everybody. And so that was another one that they did. And the other charity that, the other way they raised money for the community was they put together trips. So they would do these really fabulous trips. They went to Russia, they went to South America, they went to Spain, they went all over the world, Guatemala several times. And you could buy, passage on this trip, and Mom would curate the whole thing. Mom and Dean would sit down and they'd curate the whole trip, and they'd arrange for, you'd meet in front of St. Paul's, and the vans would pick you up and take you to the airport, and the whole trip, they had it all curated for you. And you could write off your ticket, because a large part of it went to the church, which then in turn went to the Feed the Hungry, or Patronato, or things that the church donated to. So they really, they were really instrumental in getting Feed the Hungry started
on its feet.
Yeah, and that was one of the things I think that they did for the community. That's still today. Yeah, still going. And so is Patronato Pro Niños is still on.
Yeah,
today.
they're colossal at this point.
Yep.
Polly, I wanted to speak. We're sitting here in the library,
That's right.
and in 1959, Mary Lou and I on horseback, that's what I remember, and Mother and Kiki in the car, we went to the first fundraising event for the library, which was at Pepe Ortiz's bullfighting ranch.
Oh, wow.
So
Great.
maybe I'm the only one still alive.
From that fundraiser.
That's great.
Yeah, so
And
that's,
Pepe Ortiz's ranch was, if you drove or rode your horse north toward Dolores Hidalgo, and you took the detour off to go into
Towards Celaya?
Celaya. I thought Agua Bendita was on. Okay, oh really? Calderon? Because he also had Agua Bendita out in Cortijo. Is that where you went? Okay.
oh, well, I don't know. We rode a horse back out to a ranch, that's all I know. And it was Pepe Ortiz's ranch, but I don't remember which direction.
Bueno, okay, so to Calderon then, which is, that is a long ride. So where was I going with this? Now I've lost my track.
Just in the things that our parents did that helped with the community. I mean, here you've got the library, you were doing fundraiser. My parents did things like participated in home and garden tours for those things. And it's really special when you think that these events are still happening today.
Yeah.
That they came here, and I think all of our parents didn't come to Mexico because they wanted to live cheaper than in the United States.
Yeah.
They came to Mexico because they loved Mexico, and they just jumped in with all their hearts. And so even though I didn't live here as a child and I lived in Jalisco, I always knew Mexico was where I was going to retire. It's part of your soul, and it's not the cheaper living. It's not the, well, I can get more for my money here. It's Mexico. And that's
Well,
really special.
I just want to add, since it was my mother as a single woman and a widow with her 3 girls,
Right.
she was a real adventurer.
Yes.
Yes.
And that
but-
was unusual.
Yeah, it was
Right.
unusual. too.
Was there I don't know too much about the Marquez side of the family. Can you?
I can give you
Give
some
us some-
information about the Marquez family.
Yeah, I'd love to know more about the
Well,
Marquez side.
my mother, her family, her father and her mother, my grandparents, they were from San Miguel. Well, my grandfather was from Guanajuato, and my grandmother was originally from here. My grandmother had Otomi background, which is the indigenous peoples of San Miguel. My grandfather was of Spanish descent. He was a professor. He was the superintendent of the schools in the state of Guanajuato. He was a professor, a playwright, and a poet. And my grandmother was a music teacher. She used to play the organ for the silent movies at the, and she also got to sing with Pedro Vargas. And so they started the schools. They had the school next to the bullfight, the ring, the bull
Sí, sí.
on Aradama. Yeah, they used to live there. It's Recreo.
Yeah.
They used to live there on the second floor. And
In
on
that building?
in that building. It was the school. So they had the second floor as a family, and the first floor was the school. And then they moved to Hernandez Macias. That's where my mom was born. And all 5 kids, it was my 2 uncles and the 3 sisters that lived in that house. My uncle Pepe, my uncle Pablo, Maria Eugenia, Yaya, maybe you knew my aunt Yaya, and my mom Blanca. So they were teachers. They were very instrumental in the education in the town. And all 3 sisters married Americans.
Oh.
Interestingly, my mom and her sisters used to teach also when they were old enough to teach reading and writing at the biblioteca. Before the biblioteca was here, and it was
When it was on the calzada.
Calzada,
De
right?
la
Some
Presa.
calzada,
No,
right.
no. Calzada de la Luz. Where the old.
See, that was way before my time.
No, it's somewhere up there. Somewhere up
But
there.
I think my mom did get to teach here when they had this program for illiterate teaching. So that's a little bit of their story.
And then our parents were very involved with Bellas Artes and also in the theater groups, which I'm about to go to, the theater groups and the birth of all the different theater groups. So they worked very creatively with Bellas Artes, with Carmen Masip, the Kios, creating costumes, creating backdrops for any of the various plays that were put on at Bellas Artes. It seemed like there were openings at Bellas Artes maybe 3 per week. Plays in English and in Spanish up in the little theater. So many different workshops and courses that people could take. And then they were also instrumental in helping to a lesser degree, not like some of the other women who were so determined to open a real bilingual school in San Miguel de Allende, which turned into Jose Vasconcelos. But Our parents did all the shelf building and the painting of them, and driving up to Austin, Texas, to bring back books for the school at that time. And I guess it opened in 73, 74, I believe, 75. So that's what kept them busy contributing. Yeah.
And the theater was, you know, you were
The
talking
theater.
about televisions,
Uh-huh.
and I have to say that I remember one specific, the players' workshop that was in the Instituto, and we're sitting in the theater, and it was just this raging storm. You know, you could hear the lightning and the thunder, and I was sitting in there watching this wonderful play and just thinking, this is so charming. This is so incredible that you're in this town in Mexico with all of these very creative, very adventurous people watching this fabulous play that they just did all for the love of it.
Just for the love of it.
And it just, a lot of people ask me if I am bothered by how San Miguel has grown, and I would say no, because I still have all those memories and because I still have friends like you and Cece and everybody that we can reminisce. But every place grows and changes. But I would say that the best charm of San Miguel is to just live in it, you know, just walk down the streets and realize that that street probably looks the same as it did when Pancho Villa was here. And there are theater groups, and there's all these wonderful people still in this town that are doing what they can to contribute and to help the community. And I think that's a
passionate.
wonderful thing, very passionate about
Passionate.
it. And that's not gone, that has not
No,
changed.
no,
Yeah.
not at all.
The Players Theater was, Mom was part of that. And I remember we lived out in Cieneguita at the time, on that one-lane dirt road that if you were driving and there was a car in front of you, you'd have to let it get a quarter of a mile ahead of you, or you wouldn't be able to see because the dust was so fine.
That's right.
It was just horrible. No taxis would go there. No. And we got to the railroad tracks and the train came. And it
The train.
decided it would change engines and cars. And I thought my mom was gonna spontaneously combust because it took 45 minutes for that and you couldn't go, there was no other way to go.
There was no other way.
You were just sitting there looking at the train. There were no cell phones. You couldn't run into town. It
Nope.
was too far. She wanted to, you know, be on time for her
Right,
part.
for her part in the
Her
play.
part in the play.
And she was a marvelous actress,
She did like to perform.
as is Gina, a marvelous actress.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, yeah. So give us a little more on that, because I know you play a very big role in theater here.
Well, I started theater when I was a kid. Actually, I studied ballet at Bellas Artes. Remember when Masha Bello was the ballet teacher? And I always got the...
How did it go?
Yes, she had a very, very, very stern. She was Danish. She was a Danish prima ballerina, and she was very stern, but she was good. And I had always a feeling of being in theater, so it's been in my life since I can remember. So when I came back from the States, because I moved to the U.S. After college, and 20 years later, I decided with my husband to come to San Miguel. I had to be back home. And I joined the Play Readers, which has been around for maybe 40 years. And it's been fabulous because I love performing, and it's easy to do Play Readers because we present them here. We read a play on stage. We have transitioned from the very early beginnings, which used to be at somebody's house. They read a play at their house, and then it started becoming very popular. They needed a bigger place. They moved to St. Paul's. And they had the readings there at St. Paul's, and it became more of a performance. People started coming and paying a ticket for like 10 pesos, then 20, then 30. And now we do it here, and we only charge 100 pesos. A little commercial here. I'm directing the next Play Readers, which is next week. It's called The Divas, and it's fabulous. I'm not because I'm directing. I'm saying it because it is a very funny play. It's a very funny script, and we have 2 actresses that play the divas, Marjorie Byrne and Antonia Bekowitz, and they're both hilarious. So I hope you come to see them Wednesday and Thursday of next week. And I also performed just recently with Players Workshop. I get all these names. You know, it's hard to keep them all straight because they have play in them and readers and performances. And anyway, we just did, Clara, what was the name of it?
Brutality of Fact.
Thank you. And Clara was in the cast. She was excellent, and you probably know Clara. And Harold is also here, who's also a great actor and playwright. Anyway, we did that, and we're hoping that maybe we'll perform that one in January again. But yeah, that's I've been performing on this stage, and I performed at the Bellas Artes, and I performed at the Angela Peralta when I was a little kid. So it's always been part of my life to be on stage somehow.
I think that's a really another thing that San Miguel does. Polly was saying, you know, or Diane was saying that now everybody talks about restaurants and things, but there's so many talented and passionate people, and you are like in the audience that you are right now, and you're watching a play, and there's nothing like getting back to that interaction with the community. And I think that one of the things, maybe you know it or maybe you don't, that gives you that passion for San Miguel is that if you get into the community, you feel like you're part of a community. And I think the theater is something that, you know, maybe all of us did when we were kids or went to that, but it's very much alive here. And it's really a lovely way to spend the evening, to just sit and watch real people perform right in front of your eyes, and
People
it just
you know,
connects, and
too.
it
Yeah.
connects you to everybody. And I think that's a lovely thing about this town. It's not gotten so big that you can't connect with the community.
True. And then let's see, apart from going to plays or participating in plays or building the sets for the plays or finding a way to get enough scripts for all the actors back in the day, we would go to the movies at the Cine Aldama, which, the Cine Aldama has now been closed for at least 2 decades.
And it's on Calle San Francisco.
On San Francisco. Movies were such a big deal, so there wasn't television. Maybe there would be a movie that we could all go to. And I have a distinct memory of one Thanksgiving, probably 1975 or 76. Our mother was cooking, yes, a turkey. And I'll get to how she got that turkey in a minute, okay? When word came out that there was a double bill at the movies that same evening, it was Lady Sings the Blues and Chinatown. We had guests coming for Thanksgiving, so what we did was we put Thanksgiving on hold, and we all went to the movies. And to top it off, we ran out of water.
Oh, yes.
Which I'm also going to touch on. So the turkey. It's a funny thing about Thanksgiving. It's not a holiday that is originally part of San Miguel culture, but I think there too, because of the bicultural experience, I know all the Mexicanos in my family, that's like their favorite holiday of the year. And I'm the only American in my family. And Cece. Anyhow, there was a supermarket on the square called Super Tienda Sanchez. It was run by the Sanchez sisters. Currently, I think there's a tourist type shop in there. One would go and pre-order your pavo with the hermanas Sanchez. And then you would pick, I don't know where they went, maybe they went to Mexico City for the turkeys, but you'd pick up your turkey then, if you were lucky. Did you do it that way, or?
Well, I'm not sure because I wasn't often here at Thanksgiving.
Okay.
But I would bet that it was part of Mother's trips to Mexico City.
Mom would just tell me to put it in my suitcase and bring it down. Of course, you know, at those days you could do that.
Right.
What's that? What's a turkey from my
It's a
mom?
turkey.
I don't know. A turkey.
Pásale.
I hated it because she'd just laden you down with, you know,
Yeah.
I have to have grape jam. You couldn't buy grape jelly or like peanut butter that was good. And you had to bring that and Limburger cheese and the turkey, and don't forget the box of the, I don't know. So you always felt like the pack mule when you came to visit.
Tea. There was
Yeah.
great need for tea.
Yeah.
So Gina.
The way that my parents got the turkey was through my cousin Bob Merrill. He would take trips to the States and bring back turkeys to some people. And I guess some people, you know, that way had friends go to the States and bring a turkey or several for their friends and sell them here.
And then the other thing that I recall, while we're on Thanksgiving, sweet potatoes. Hello, there weren't sweet potatoes of the kind, you know, the bright yellow orange yams.
Not the
as
kind
we
you
know them.
wanted.
They had camotes with the brilliant purple skin and the white flesh inside. So my mother would reluctantly cook up these camotes, which came out gray-white after you put them through the ricer. You had this hideous mess of gray-white muck. And then we'd put food coloring in it and try to get it somewhere toward this color, but it never really quite worked. There was always some ghastly gray dry blood color. But they tasted pretty good. So it was fun to see, and I think the memories of how people were so resourceful with what they had available. Up until like City Market opened a couple of years ago, right? And then there were
Well,
still-
remember when Gigante opened?
Oh yeah, that was like a big
I
deal.
thought we were gonna lose our minds.
Right.
There was a grocery store. One of the aisles, and I'm talking about the entire length of the aisle, had all the tuna fish that they had. It was the same brand, all lining the shelves. But you could go to one store and buy stuff, because otherwise, Aaron was born in 83, so he was here in 86. You had to go to every store to buy everything.
That's
even in the late 80s and the early 90s.
On foot.
Carrying your bag. The good news is you could only buy what you could carry. So maybe we all were a little in better shape in those days.
Yeah.
But when the Gigante opened, it was just like, you know, and it was not the greatest store, but it was pretty amazing.
It was snazzy.
It was, I think it had, I don't think it had an automatic door. I don't think it had an automatic door, but it had aisles and shopping carts.
Yeah.
And you could go and walk down the aisle and you felt like, boy, were we modern.
That's right.
You know, and that's as you know, recent as the mid to late 80s.
Did you or your parents, Gina, have an account at Jefer where they could shop downtown? There was a little supermarket next to the movie.
I remember the name, but to tell you the truth, I don't
Maybe
know.
not quite. I know we could go down to this little, similar to Bonanza, so that you guys can relate. And our mother would give us a shopping list, and off we'd go after school down to first the market, and then a pit stop at Jefer where we didn't have to pay. We just wrote our signature at the tender age of what? Were we 15 and 13? And once a month, my father would go down and
Pay the bill.
pay the bill.
Yep.
And which brings me to the bean bank. Do you want to
Oh,
talk
yeah.
about the old bean bank? This goes
Well,
way back.
The way, when we were here in '57, there weren't any banks, and the way you got cash was gringos would give their checks. Was it an Hoyos brother that had the bean bank? One of the Hoyos brothers had the bean bank, and he had a stall of beans, and that was the bean bank. But he would cash checks for gringos and give pesos, and that's how you got pesos. Was
And it-
through the bean bank.
It was located on the corner of Núñez and Mesones. At the
Okay.
top, if you're going up, it was on the right-hand corner, the bean bank.
So the bean bank was still here when you were here?
I don't know if it was still operating as a bean bank, but that's where it was located. Yeah.
Well, anyway, that was the bank in the old days.
None of that stuff.
No
yeah.
ATMs. The first bank was Banco del Centro.
The one was at kind of a Lloyd's near the Presidencia.
Yeah, that came next.
Yeah.
First was Banco del Centro, and same thing, everything was manual. You had an account. I know our father opened an account for each of us, and he'd give us money, and we'd go and take it down to Banco del Centro, and they kept the different accounts in a shoebox. And they would finger through the cardboard, pull out your little old-fashioned deposit card, take your cash, write it in, put it back in the shoebox. And Danielle Shoup was the bank manager,
Oh, Senor Shoup.
who had
Yeah, Mother had a
the
story about
comb
that.
over. Danielle
Was it
Shoup.
a saucy story?
No,
Oh.
it was just, I'll just tell it real quick. Kiki was traveling in South America. and
Mr.
her-
Shoup?
No, my sister, Christina. And got her wallet or whatever stolen. So she called Mother, and so Mother sent via Senor Shoup at the bank, wired her $400. And when Kiki had to go to the embassy to get the money in Peru, and they gave her the equivalent of $4,000.
Yay!
And she said, "There's a mistake here. My mother wouldn't have wired $4,000." And they said, "That's what was wired." So Kiki stuffed the cash in her boot and got on a plane and flew back and walked into Santa Monica and took off her boot and said, "Here's your change." And Mother said, "What?" And she went down and she told Senor Shoup that there had been a mistake, that they had wired 4,000 instead of 400. And he said, "Oh, no, there's not been a mistake." So Mother just went home and put the money in the drawer and waited about a month when Senor Shoup called her and said, "Betty,
Oops,
there's been a
there's a
mistake."
mistake on that
And Mother
cardboard.
went down and said, "Here's your money." So figured out this mistake. So
It was a lot of honest people too. You know, that was nice. And remember, you couldn't get a phone.
Oh, no,
Like,
no
just
phones.
because you lived here didn't mean you could have a telephone, because somebody had to die. All the lines were used, so somebody would have to die
Right.
before you were next on the list. You could get your phone.
Did you have a phone in your house?
Yes, I did. And but we actually had it first. When we moved to Mesones from my grandmother's house, we lived in Mesones, and it was still when the phone numbers were giving out, and my home's home number was 21212. 21212 was one of the earlier numbers. My grandparents had 20302. This was before we even added the 15 to it, right?
Yeah.
Back in the day,
Yeah.
our phone number started with 2, and then 4 numbers followed. So I can remember my grandparents and mine, my aunt's 21276 was the other one. So
We were
it was, yeah.
20852, and then Claire's, our grandmother on Sollano, was 20585. That was it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And now we have to remember all the other
And
20
passwords.
numbers ago, yes.
Here comes another memory. I was talking about this panel discussion with my Mexican husband, Victorino, who is also literal de San Miguel, as are his parents and grandparents. And he said, oh, don't forget to bring up the great big tanks of water in the Parque Juarez. There was one right outside the Via Santa Monica, great big holding tanks of water. Uncovered, right. Concrete, deep. They were probably, I don't know, at least as long as this and all the way back, quite deep. And it was the water that flowed naturally down from El Chorro, which would course its way down, and you, at any day of the year, the street gutters had water flowing through them. They got diverted to keep these tanks of water full because not everybody had water in their houses. And so whether you were somebody who needed water, you would take your bucket to the big tank, or later, when there were taxis, the taxis would pull up to wash their cars there. But all the young boys also would, in the warmer season, strip down and jump into the tanks, which is always great fun to watch as a teenager. All these boys with their white undershirts, stripping down and diving into these concrete holding tanks. Do you remember those?
No, I don't.
You don't?
I know that
No?
water, though, when we had Pegaso, we would have to drive out to Cieneguita, because we had a well, fill one of those big black tanks that we had permanently strapped to my brother-in-law's truck, fill it with water, bring it back into town, and siphon it up to the roof so that Pegaso could operate, because the town would run out of water often.
Or just turn it off.
Or just turn it off.
Just turn
Yeah.
it off.
Yeah.
I recall water getting turned off. 3 days later, 4 days later, the water was still off.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
so we would all just forego showering. Cooking was, you had to be really creative. I think that's where pate food came in really handy to spread on bimbo bread. Right? We ran out of things.
Yeah, I don't remember much about the water tanks, but I do remember seeing the women washing their clothes at the Parque Juarez from the water that came down from El Chorro. That's another memory from the park. They're not washing their clothes there anymore.
No, I guess they aren't, are they? They're dry wells for,
Right.
yeah.
That's one of the lucky things about Cieneguita, is we have a well that we've grandfathered in, and so we never don't have water. The aquifer could run dry.
Run dry.
But a lot of the villagers out in Cieneguita, now there's finally water there. But it only runs a couple of times a week. So they have to fill up their tanks and be careful about it. And
Yeah.
I think we're spoiled because we just have our own well, and it's still legal, but they're not letting
No more-
the state
No more
drill any more wells. Yeah, yeah.
No, my husband actually, there was a time they didn't have running water in their house. And so you bought the water from aguadores. And these were men who would go down to the Parque Juarez,
Get there.
fill up their own buckets, and then walk with them with a yoke over their backs, house to house, dispatching the water. And then the municipal water pipes started being plugged into each home, little by little. But all the fountains in town worked so that people could go and get water. Yeah, right. And there was a beautiful fountain. Well, gosh, there was a beautiful one down by the Instituto Allende, Pila Seca, and that water was always running. Yeah. Recreo, there was one.
Yeah, I think
See,
even in '87, still a lot of them were still working
Yeah.
with water running. Yeah.
you want to hear a funny story about a water fountain?
Did you get in one?
Not quite. We figured out a way with a friend. She lived on the corner of the Parque Juarez. We figured out that the actual llave, the key to turn the water off and on in the fountain, was inside the house. So we being rascals, a few of us would go up on the roof of the house and keep watch, waiting for some innocent passerby to come walking along with their groceries or with their dog. The others were downstairs where the llave was to turn it on. So all we had to do was, in the right moment, turn on the faucet and soak the passerby. Oh, because we had plugged up the spigot where the water came out in the fountain, right there on the corner of Tenerias and Aldama, with a chewing gum. So we were able to get all kinds of people wet. Until somebody figured out where it was coming from and knocked at the door, and we booked it. What horrible things did you all do when you wanted to get it up to mischief?
Well, I don't remember a horrible thing, but that was something we did sometimes. It was just when we first came here as kids, the bells were just, something else, something different, something new. We would go, and the guy that was kind of in charge of the bell tower at the parroquia was named Simon, I remember that. And we would give Simon a few pesos, and he would let us go up and ring the bells. And we would just wildly ring the bells. And that,
Confuse
whoa,
people about
boom.
what time it was. It's like, it's not 3 o'clock yet. Why are they ringing the bells?
I think this was before they rang
Yeah.
the bells for the
For time,
time.
right.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's about as bad as we got, was to go up and ring the bells. And we didn't do it often because we didn't want to get in trouble. But anyway, we did it sometimes.
Yeah, we could. We could go up the clock tower if you asked Don Simon for permission.
Oh, you remember Don Simon still?
We went up on several occasions, I know. We even had a class in English literature up there once. So, what were you going to say?
The one thing that I remember being mischievous, and that was because my friend got me to do it. Of course, it's always a friend that does it, right? A friend from elementary school, and she was always trying to figure out ways to be mischievous. When we lived on Mesones, somebody next to us had a pool, which was like, wow, somebody has a swimming pool in their house. Yes, so we had walked all the way to the top of the rooftop. We were on the roof, and we were looking around, and she said, oh, we can do this. So there was a plant growing up there on the rooftop, and it had all these spines, needles. And she said, we should grab these needles and throw them into the pool. And I said, okay. And so we did. And I felt really bad about it, but at the same time, it was fun doing that. And then, because she thought it was going to be, I don't know, fun, and we did. So that was mischievous of us to, throw all those needles into that swimming pool. So whoever was going to swim there was going to suffer somehow.
That was like radical bad.
That's
so bad.
Yeah.
What about you?
No,
You were an angel.
I
Right,
was.
yes, look
I
at her.
was.
She's got the
No,
little halo.
I was. I didn't like to do things bad. If I even got a little angry with my mom, I'd buy her flowers, say I was sorry, I didn't want to get in a fight. I was not the mischievous one. I didn't do that.
And then she opened a disco.
And then I opened a disco. I did.
Yes.
Which disco did you open?
Denial.
Where?
It was where, it's right where Sollano and Correo meet. Manantil is there now, but it was.
But there was the hotel in there.
But there was the hotel.
La
and
Morada,
then there,
no?
Yeah, La
Sí.
Morada, and then there was the Doors, which was that Tierra Madre store for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Because we were through there, and we had a set director for Age of the Innocents was in town, and she made these giant Egyptian statues. And those were the entrance.
Right.
Horus and Seth. And then it was Cliff Von Yeager who did all the
right.
painting of the murals inside. And Cece was our DJ for our very first opening night. And the floors, we had a huge dance floor. And those floors are in my house in Cieneguita now.
Yeah.
I took them all out and I made the floors there out of the dance floor.
Out of the old floor.
From the Denial. It was supposed to be Del Nilo, but my husband didn't know how to say Del Nilo. He didn't speak Spanish, and he said, "Oh, we'll call it Del Nile." And I said, "Denial for a bar is a good name." So
Yeah,
we
it was
left
a great
it at
bar.
Denial.
It was a great dancing.
Yeah.
I think you must like to dance.
I love to dance.
Where would you dance?
When I was at dancing age, Laberintos and El Ring.
El Ring.
Laberintos used to be across the street from the Instituto Allende, where the pharmacy, Farmacias del Ahorro is now, right? And it was called Laberintos because you go in and you think you were like in a labyrinth. There was all these arches. Well, they're still there, but at night and with the lights out, you think you were like in a cave, and it was pretty cool looking. And then you had El Ring, which was like the better, pristine place to go dance, which was on Hidalgo.
A lot of debauchery.
Do you want me to take questions? Is that what you're asking me? Okay, fire away. We can't see you, so.
All the radio stations.
Oh,
Wonderful.
They still are.
Because that was,
And Spanish or just
no,
Español.
Spanish.
See.
But you knew everything with the radio
You
station.
still do.
You
We still listen
would-
to the radio.
Everybody would listen to it because, and if you had a radio and your neighbor didn't, you might turn it up so that everybody could enjoy it.
And Pepe,
Whether they did or not.
Cabezon was the radio
Yep.
persona here.
Well, I'm so old, when we first lived here, there was no radio.
No radio station.
No radio station, no
Right,
radio.
right. So
Yeah,
that's-
radio was and still is a big
I
deal.
was just gonna, what is a Mexican kitchen without a radio? I don't know, but we didn't have any radio.
Construction site. What about a construction site? We need a radio, right? Yeah. XESQ was the first radio station, if I'm not mistaken. Was it always broadcast from Sollano?
As
No. It was on Correo. On Correo is where they first had this station.
And that's how you found out, at 3 o'clock, you found out whose birthday, well, in the morning also, you heard whose birthday it was, who was being married, who was dying, and so forth. But you had, all your information was from the radio station.
you
Yeah.
lost a pet, you would say something. If you, everything was
Your
the radio.
wallet?
Yep.
And then, of course, anybody, particularly from the Mexican, more rural families who was traveling legally or otherwise to the U.S., would call into the radio when they had made it safely across the border. And so you would tune in, and Pepe Cabezon, there was a litany of names. Pues fíjese que llegó con bien José Dionisio Rangel. Se encuentra bien. ¿Y quién más? Ay, fulano de tal has made it across the border and says everything's fine. And so you would listen for names of people you actually knew, saying, oh, okay, they made it. Phew.
That's a good question.
Sí. ¿Qué más? Anything else from out there?
Telephone operator.
I'm sorry, what?
Telephone operators.
Telephone operator.
Oh,
Like
the
when
te-
you made a call.
Oh, when you made a
Did it go
call.
straight through, or did you talk with the?
Well, I think El Torito had the long distance booths that you could
Oh,
go
yeah.
into, right? Do you remember those?
Well,
Joe?
what I remember in 58 and 59 is that if you got a phone call from the States, it was at the San Francisco Hotel. And they would send a little boy up with a note to come back at a certain hour, and the person would call you back. And that was the telephone.
And you had
Yes.
to schedule calls.
Yes.
If you wanted to make a call, you went to the place where they'd have the phone and you would say, I'd like my, 9 o'clock or my 8 o'clock slot. And you had to be there or else forget it.
Right.
Your time's gone.
So how
Next.
did we, when, for instance, we were still living in New York, we hadn't moved here yet, but our grandmother was living here, and she would suddenly call New York, but I imagine she too had to go through
Into
the
the queue,
process
yeah.
into the little closet with the pre-appointed time to make the long. I don't know if it was El Torito or San Francisco.
I remember the San Francisco hotels where I remember.
And then there was one
Next to
on.
La Loca.
Sí,
Next to the loca.
sí.
I remember, yeah, the booth was right there next to that
Yeah.
room.
Okay.
I remember
Sí,
that.
sí. But then there was another caseta that was across from the Cine Aldama. It's where I learned to drink café de olla upstairs. I would go up there and have a café de olla, and I thought that was heaven. But yeah, operators.
Yep, had to have those.
¿Alguien más?
I think we could probably sit here for hours and listen to this.
Well, you're right. But I think certainly one of the things Diane told me, and I feel compelled to say it, she said, we're going to do this and talk about how your parents made an impact on the community. And part of the timing was based because it's Dia de los Muertos.
Sí.
And I think that as whether we live here and we've lived here for a long time or whether we're new to it, I think that having some respect and reverence for some of these traditions is important. It's lovely and fun to go to the Jardín and dress up like the Catrina and all of that, but it's still a very real time where you take your personal time to remember people that were important to you. And it's a lovely tradition. We do it at home. When you go to the graveyards, you really can get a sense of people just remembering. And it's not, sometimes people will be crying because they miss them, but it's not a sad, it's just you're still with us. And the other thing that still happens in San Miguel that I have seen that has changed is Easter Sunday. You used to be able to hear a pin drop.
Yeah.
When those parades would come through, everybody had a reverence for it. And I do remember maybe 10 years ago just getting really irate at some man who stepped in front of the parade to get his, picture. And I just thought, this is not your Disneyland. This is a culture, and this is something real to everybody here. So, be respectful of those and enjoy all the levity that is around some of the things. But I think having reverence for the people that have made the city what it is and for Mexico, for its traditions, is really important. And I think that if everybody can always, carry that in, you'll enjoy Mexico a lot more too. It won't just be that place that's cheaper than the United States or something else. It'll be the heart and soul that it's always been. And I think we're all very fortunate that we are children of people that were adventurers, that were pioneers, that
Or
struck
loved
out.
it for what it was.
And
And-
came here and
yeah.
said, oh, well, I don't have water, well, I'll make do. And they all did. And I think we're very fortunate to
We are.
be able to remember them
Always.
today.
Yeah.
Yeah.